Especially friends, welcome back to the Picture Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, especially on Spotify. Today, our special guest is Kyikyi. Kyikyi is the founder of Himalayan Dumplings, one of the first ever woman-owned Tibetan food brand in the US, specifically Momos. In this episode, we talk about how Momo is more than just food. It's a medium to tell our story, our Tibetan story. We also talk about how Momo making can be a dangerous business. We also talk about the beauty, but also the challenges of raising mixed children. All of this in this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Welcome to Pija Podcast.
Awesome. Kihila, thank you so much for coming to the Pidja podcast.
Thank you for having me, Sirila.
I think, the two main reasons why, I love you and your business is number one, your energy is super like calming. And then like secondly, all of your brand, like the color schemes and the pictures that you use like just right behind you, it's just like so modern. Uh, Do you put in a lot of thought into that? Like who makes all the graphics? Like do you choose that? Do you have somebody doing that for you?
Yeah, the branding part was very, very intentional and very important to me. Before I even launched, I spent months just on branding alone because I realized that when I launch, I would be the first woman-owned Tibetan food brand, especially a dumpling brand in the entire country. And I knew that I wasn't just selling my products, that in some sense I will be the first introduction to Tibetan culture for many, many Americans, especially in my community. That's why I was very intentional about the colors I selected, the graphics that I use. So a lot of the colors that I use in my branding are actually influenced or inspired from our lumta, our Tibetan prayer flags.
Mm. And why the black and yellow color scheme that I'm seeing in the background at the moment?
Partly because yellow is always my favorite color. There's something about color psychology, right? Yellow is very uplifting, happy. It instantly lifts my mood. So, I always like to use yellow heart emoji even before I officially launch as a brand, on social media and stuff like that. So, yeah, out of the Lumta colors, yellow really resonates with my spirit and my energy. So that's why yellow. And plus, it stands out, especially when I'm at a farmer's market booth. Standing out in a crowd of white tents or canopies is extremely important visually, right? So that was another reason as well.
Got it. And then Tashi Dele, congratulations. You just opened up your first ever shop. Is that correct? Am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, yeah. Earlier this year, I built out what I call my little Himalayan dumpling factory or
Wow.
my little Momo factory. It's essentially a production kitchen at the back. And here I'm sitting in the little cafe storefront where I open up on Friday evenings so people can come in and dine in and try Tibetan foods.
Got it. That's super cool. What goes into, building a like before you were e-commerce during like COVID, like direct to customers in that way, but now this is a different avenue. Like what are the
Right.
different sort of challenges? Like I'm sure there's a lot more challenges. Could you talk a little bit about those challenges and the differences between like e-commerce versus actually having a storefront?
Yeah, yeah. So the differences are immense depending on what sales channel you want to pursue. I do want to give a little bit of context to my small business journey. So before I built this year, when I launched last year, I didn't have the financial resources to build out this brick and mortar space. So I was actually producing my frozen ready to cook Momo and Tibetan hand pies out of a what is called a commissary kitchen, which essentially means it's a commercial kitchen that you can rent. Food producers like me can rent by the hour, where essentially I have a workstation that I'm producing out of. So all my branded bags and everything, people assume that I was producing in a big factory when in reality it was just a long stainless steel table that I was using to make, to bag up and everything, and people were picking up curbside. So it was as bootstrapped as it got in terms of launching, because that was all I had. So that was what I worked with, right? So that was year number one. Year number two, I saved up all of every single penny that I made in sales. I reinvested back into my small business in order to prop up. Right? Small business is very much like a baby. You have the gestational period where you're nurturing it during pregnancy. Then once it come out, it can't walk and run immediately as you would like it to. You will have to teach the baby to sit up first, crawl next, walk, then only the running part comes. I feel like my first year of launch was kind of like a gestational phase in some sense, where I was figuring out the kinks of the process, learning to scale a little bit, increase my production, figuring out cost of goods, profitability, and so on, and what's vibing with customers, what's tracking, what's not, pricing, messaging, all of that. Once I learned that, I had an opportunity 1 year to save up all the money that I made from sales. And then I started planning for the brick and mortar. Right? Then I feel like now my baby is kind of being able to sit up and kind of crawling. And being in the brick and mortar is a whole different beast
Yeah.
because now your overhead costs have skyrocketed exponentially. Because when I'm renting a commercial kitchen, paying $18 to $25 an hour. And now here you have all of a sudden you're paying thousands of dollars for rent, right? So it just to break even to pay the basic costs of overhead, utilities, internet, all the things that comes with have running a brick and mortar operation, you have to be able to have the sales to back it up to break even, right? Then only you can think about profit. So there is a new layer of complexity that you have to start thinking about. You can't necessarily produce the same way. You have to be able to produce a lot more. Then you have to be able to sell more. You have to start thinking of new sales channels and so on and so forth. So first year I was just in one farmer's market. This year I'm in two farmers markets, and then Friday evenings I open for dining. So it's been like a crawling stage for me where I'm being very intentional. I'm a solo entrepreneur, so I have only so much mental and financial bandwidth, right? Even if I have all these ideas of growing so big, I can only do so much in one day, right? So that's why my growth strategy has been very intentional.
Mm,
So yeah, there's a lot more future plans in the works where I'm sowing the seeds in the background right now for future expansion.
got it. And then I would expect, just to get a little bit technical, I would expect that, the margins on e-commerce, like you said, are like probably higher because you have less overhead. Well, what was the motivation behind doing a brick and mortar?
The motivation was scalability, growth, right? So on the one hand, I can preserve my profit margins, right? And 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 likewise keep my costs small, cost of renting the space, cost of labor and everything. But along with that, what happens subsequently is that my production is also very small. If my production is very small, my sales is also relatively small because I can only produce in small space, in small batches, right? If my aspiration, which it is, my aspiration is to ultimately become a national brand, so I can tell our Tibetan story nationwide. At some point, I have to take that leap of faith and invest a little more. And in order to do that, I need my own production space where I'm not limited in scalability. So that was the primary reason why I decided to invest in a brick and mortar where it's not a restaurant, which people sometimes mistakenly assume it's a restaurant. They ask me, why aren't you open every day? Because I'm not trying to be a restaurant. The core purpose of this space is to be a production space where ultimately it operates like a factory where I'm producing ready to cook Himalayan dumplings and Tibetan hand pies, that this will be the central kitchen, if so to speak, that will support production that will ultimately go into different sales channels that I will gradually start expanding into. So that was the thought process behind it, is that if I want to be a national brand, I have to have the overhead and the infrastructure to support that kind of scale of production. And that's why.
Mm, got it. Interesting. I know we jumped right into like those technical questions, but rewinding a little bit, back to COVID, or even before COVID, like you were basically in a corporate job. I think you were a business development manager. Is that correct? what was the motivation behind starting Himalaya Dumplings? And then in our previous conversation when we're on our call, we talked about how it wasn't like out of the blue. It took a lot of prep process. I think you said 2 years of very intentional and like long hours of prep process, thinking through everything, right? You were very strategic with it. Could you take us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah. So yeah, I was my corporate career, I was a business development manager focusing on e-commerce sales. So I was very familiar with working with big boxes like the Costco's and the Staples and so on. I was selling software. So I did that for over a decade, I think about 15 years. I was fortunate enough to have a very well-paying job with unlimited paid time off and things like that. I decided to walk away from it during pandemic is when that happened. So taking a little bit step back, prior to this, I was doing this on a very micro scale. I was doing seasonal pop-ups, right? Every summer, even while I was a business development manager, I started doing pop-ups about 6 years ago prior to launching. And my aspiration behind doing that was because I noticed there was absolutely no Tibetan food representation in my local community. And so, with that in mind, I was like, I'm going to do it if there's no one to do it. I had a realization that food can be such a powerful medium to tell a story without being too threatening or polarizing, like, for example, politics can do, you know? So, that was one of the reasons why food is my love language. So, I decided to tell our story using food, right? So that journey began 6 years prior to launch, doing seasonal pop-ups. Pandemic happened, all the events, in-person events stopped, so I couldn't do pop-ups. And it was sometime during the pandemic, I remember, I was just Googling something, I can't remember what it was, but I came upon a business article from India that talked about the top five Momo brands, multi-million dollar Momo brands in India. And I was like, wow, I knew that Momo had become really big in India, a staple street food in India, but I didn't realize that it was at that level, right? So I started researching it and I was like, oh my goodness, every single one of these multi-million dollar Momo brands in India are owned by non-Tibetan men. I was, it blew my mind. And it just I felt this fire in me. You know, up until then, I had been asked a lot, why don't you sell your Momo frozen and so on and so forth? How come you don't sell in stores? But I'm very risk averse by nature. I don't like taking big risks. Kind of been nurtured to stick to a stable job. It pays well. It's comfortable. Stick to it. Don't ruffle feathers. That kind of thing. That many might be familiar with that kind of nurturing upbringing. But when I saw that article, I had this moment, this epiphany. And I was like, dude, I don't care. I mean, of course, I'm still scared. I'm terrified. I'm still the same risk averse person, Ra. I have kids to feed. I have a family to support. And I have an amazing well paying job. And I was like, but at that moment when I read that, I had this fire in me that I was like, you know what? I am going to do it. I'll be the first woman-owned, maybe even Tibetan food brand, dumpling brand, especially the only Tibetan dumpling brand. And I will tell our story. I know it's going to be scary. I know very little about selling in retail. I don't know anything about it, in fact, but I will do it. And like I've done everything in my life, you know, after immigrating here, everything I've had to learn everything, right? Navigating a new country and getting a corporate career and all of that. I was like, I'll handle it that same way. I'll do the best as I can, and I will be intentional in my approach. I will start it incrementally. I know that I can't become a national brand immediately. It will take me years probably, but I will start in bite size. That was my approach. I will start in bite and I don't know what the outcome will be, but I will give it my best and let's see where it goes. And it was with that really was a turning pivotal point for me where yeah, it just, anyway, it gave me the courage. So, in spite of my fears that I still have, moments of uncertainty and doubt that I still have from time to time, that desire for representation and owning our narrative was far stronger. And that's
Mm,
why I am where I am today.
got it. Got it. Have you that reminded me of I'm not sure if you've seen the Shark Tank episode where we have Chirby. It might be like a, of course, not just a Tibetan thing. It might be also like a Himalayan thing, Nepali, Bhutan, whatever. Uh, Chirby is like the cheese
Yeah,
that
hardened cheese.
the
Yeah,
hardened cheese blocks. There was a Shark Tank episode where these group of, I think, Nepali men were pitching this churpi as a dog treat or like
dog
a
treat.
dog medicine, and I was like
Right.
shocked. They were able to get a multi-million-dollar deal from a shark, I think, which is like absolutely crazy to me. It's like so like prevalent in our culture. It's just about like commercializing it, and like all this like mindfulness apps that you see now, like
Yeah,
Calm or Headspace. Like this is
yeah,
all from our tradition, right? We just didn't know how
yes,
to monetize it.
yes. And that was one of the thoughts that I had when I saw first came across that business article. I was like, wow, this is food that we've been eating since we could eat solid food. This is food that we grew up with. This is how many Tibetan older generation has opened up Momo stalls in Majnukatila in Delhi or in Bodha in Nepal or wherever. This was our bread and butter for many of our older generation, even our current generation. How come not even one Tibetan was amongst? So it kind of made me reflect on these Sakaya money because given our history and us being refugees in these countries of India and Nepal, our mindset is also, our psychology is also influenced greatly by our older generation who has gone through a lot of trauma of being displaced, right? With trauma of being displaced and so much uncertainty around you also comes risk aversion. You're very risk averse, right? After all, you've already gone through so much uncertainty. You want to stick to what's stable. So that's why it's very common we hear Tibetan families saying, "Oh, lega chita nurse, chinayapoyore, doctor chita nayapoyore, gege chita jobs that are stable."
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder how much of that intergenerational trauma plays into our decision making in this generation of how bold, for lack of better words, we can be in really dreaming bigger, in really challenging status quo.
Mm,
So when I saw those, there was maybe 15 Momo multi-million dollar, not a single Tibetan, it really shook me.
mm,
And so I was like, perhaps I can be the first, and perhaps I won't be the last. And by being the first, perhaps I can pave the way and show other Tibetans and other communities from marginalized communities like ours that we too can dare to dream big,
mm.
bigger, bigger
Right,
than we have been taught to.
right, right.
So, yeah, along with what you were saying about the Shark Tank episode, with the Churpi being introduced as something that's Nepali, which is inaccurate. Same thing with Momo is happening, starting to happen in uh, in the US, right? I was reading on, for example, this is how much the size of a population plays into representation and narratives on social media, for example, which is how most of us consume information these days. The amount of Tibetans out living in the diaspora outside of Tibet is so small. It's what the last count was around 150,000 or abouts, that it is the same Tibetans around the world living outside of Tibet in exile is the same number of Nepali immigrants living in Texas alone.
Mm,
That gives you perspective on how small we are. And the reason why I point that out in terms of our numbers is because it comes into play in our representation. When it comes to food, for example, you see Momo, you look up social media, for example, and Momo is widely represented as it being a Nepali dumpling. Rarely does a non Tibetan entrepreneur ever credit or acknowledge Tibetan origin. Rarely. And it may not be intentional, it may just be a lack of knowledge because for many Nepali, for example, or Indians that are millennials or younger, for them, all they've seen is only Nepali or Indians selling Momo mostly, and rarely Tibetans because we're outnumbered.
mm,
Right? So that's why I feel like numbers. play a really important role. Our size of a community plays a really important role. And that's why I am so intentional about our storytelling aspect on social media. I feel that it's important for me. The whole reason why I walked away from my corporate career was not to become more wealthier. I was making plenty of money. I had a very good lifestyle. It was not because of that. It was for something far bigger than me, where I really wanted to make it a movement in some way, you know? And how I knew best was through food, through Momo, which I love.
Mm.
So I'm hoping that ultimately by becoming a national brand, like I do on my packaging, I tell a story about the origin of Momo, whatever. I want it to be an awareness,
Mm.
a gateway, so to speak, to Tibetan culture. And so that's why I resigned from my job. And that's why I do what I do, working every single day for the past few years, 70 hours plus averaging. So yeah,
You work 70 hours per week.
easily. Yeah,
So
easily.
that's like 10 hours a day, basically.
Yeah, almost two full-time jobs. Yeah.
Wow. Well, could you take us like a day in the life or a day in a week? Probably that's probably a better indication.
Yeah, I
Over.
plan out my days normally on Sundays. I plan out my week. So I figure out what I have in inventory in terms of my frozen ready to cook momo or Tibetan hand pies, and I do an inventory check on weekends after I do the farmers market. Then I decide what I have specific production days during the week. So like Wednesdays, Thursdays, I have production days, full days doing production. So then Mondays, I have to do the shopping, order all of my stuff. And then Mondays, I always say Monday is going to be my day off day, but I always end up doing something. So it's never been successful. But Mondays is when I do my planning for the week. Production days, shopping, if I need to post social media, if I need to start thinking about, for example, farmers markets is coming to a close. All farmers market generally close for the winter season for about 2 or 3 months, which means my source of revenue dries up for the few months. So I have to start thinking about, okay, what alternate sales channel can I pursue into during those months and so on and so forth, right? So there is a lot of day-to-day operations that are happening during the week, but also thinking of medium and long-term goals at the same time, because even if long-term goal maybe 12 months away, the seeds need to start sowing right now, you know? So that's one of the biggest challenges I feel of being a small business entrepreneur. It's not necessarily that marketing is hard or production operations is hard or, customer service or sales is hard. It's because as a solo entrepreneur, you kind of have to juggle how to do it all. That's what makes it challenging, right? When you're working on a bootstrapped budget, I have a bunch of part-time employees now, and I hope that by next year I'll be able to hire full-time employees. But for now, I do everything that I can to save money, and that's why I end up working so many hours, and I'm perpetually tired right now. Yeah.
How do you something that I face in my personal experience is like I think I have a pretty good work ethic, just being, just seeing my mother, my father's working super hard, right? And hearing stories of like of course my grandparents working super hard, and of course coming from Tibet, being refugees in India. And I see my mom, even though she has a good stable job, but then I'm not sure if you know Chef. It's like a organization where you can sell like food and they help you deliver it and stuff like that.
I've
Uh,
heard of it, yes.
yeah, so she did that as well, and she's always had like a second job or like a part-time job on the weekend. So like that work ethic, it's funny. I get super happy when I get 10,000 steps on my Fitbit. She gets
Oh my
10,000,
goodness.
yeah, she gets 10,000 steps just in the kitchen. It's incredible. Like she's always moving around. So I think I have a decent work ethic, but then I think the main difference between my mother and I is that I feel tired or I get burnt out, right? And I don't see her doing that. She has to take care of us and her work, part-time work, whatever it may be. What do you have any advice for me for not getting burnt out or preventing burnout?
That's so subjective. I feel, I don't know that there is a one size fit all approach to not getting burnt out. I think it's so situational and so personal. We all have different bandwidths, right? Tolerance levels for how much pressure we can take on day to day. I think when you have a tougher childhood, you kind of builds the resilience right since when you're a child. So we are able to tolerate a lot more curveballs and, challenges, a little bit extra mile, going the extra mile. I don't know that that's necessarily healthy, to be honest, mentally or physically. Who knows? We'll find that out. But I feel that in general, an individual's tolerance for how much pressure and work and effort they can put in a day or any given week is very situational. But for someone like your mom, for example, if she has gone through what she's gone through for most of her generation, and even my generation, for example, growing up not wealthy, very modest, humble beginnings, you learn to do many things. You learn to be very resourceful since you're little, I was renting out my comic books my mom reminded me the other day how I used to walk to Boulder. I used to love reading comic books when I was little. But comic books, Archie comics and whatnot, were
Mm.
quite expensive. I couldn't afford it. My parents couldn't. So I used to save up all my money from Little Sarah and birthdays and stuff like that, and used to buy Archie comic books. So what I used to do to buy more Archie comic books and snacks and stuff was I used to collect all my Archie comic books, put it in a bed sheet, bundle them up, walk maybe a few miles to Bodhanat Stupa, lay out my bed sheet and organize my comic books and rent it out to kids who were waiting for the parents to go Kora around Bauda. And I used to rent it, I don't know, 25 paisa or whatever that was. But that's how I used to make money. You have to be entrepreneurial spirit in some ways, resourceful to figure out how to go about it because our means were very limited growing up. And I really feel that that plays into our psyche as adults that
Mm.
in some ways we may have a lot higher tolerance for stress and pressure than my kids' generation, for example, who right now I have two daughters, and their lifestyle is a lot more comfortable than mine. They don't have to go fetch water because there is water being rationed. They don't have to go fetch up the hill and go get 2 buckets of water at 9 years old. I did that. I knew what it was like to not have running water or electricity throughout the day and stuff like that. So I feel that that really builds resilience and character. And maybe that's a silver lining in having a kind of hard upbringing is that it really toughens you up. So to answer your question, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I think it all depends on your situation and yeah, you as an individual. But I would push and try to match your mom's perseverance or
Got it.
resilience.
Got it.
Yeah, because we all have our own breaking points, right? And I think we each know what is our breaking point. So
Right.
yeah.
Got it. Is there anything you do specifically to like rest and recover? I mean, I'm sure you don't get too much time to do that, but
Yeah, I don't get too much time to do that. What I like to do is I like to save up a Netflix series that I'm like,
mm,
ooh, like Dexter or something, And I'll save it and then I'll save it for like a Sunday evening or whatever, and I hope that Monday I can sleep in a little bit, and then I'll do like a marathon of and stay up too late, get too few hours sleep, and then yeah, I end up being tired. But yeah, sleeping, walking, writing. I love, love, love writing.
mm,
Writing my thoughts really helps me. And oddly, social media. Social media can be one of those platforms that can be very toxic to our mental health. And also, I feel if used the right way for yourself, can be very therapeutic. I use social media in some sense like my diary. I
mm,
share my vulnerabilities. I share my highs, my lows, and in some ways, it's a platform where I can share my journey with people from everywhere, and then they interact with me through messages or comments or whatever. And it's actually I don't know,
mm,
I find it very fulfilling
mm.
most days, not always, most days.
Are you a pen and paper gal or are you more of a typer when you write in journal?
Totally old school.
Yeah.
Totally old school. There's something so satisfying about hitting the pen to paper. And I know everyone's like, oh, you need to be more efficient or whatever, which I try to. I'm not very tech savvy. I've shared that numerous times on social media. One of my biggest challenges as an entrepreneur is like I'm so technically inept that I have to look up YouTube on how to unscrew something or install something or whatever. But yes, I every morning I start off with my to-do list and then I check off. It's something so satisfying about checking off my list.
Got it. I'm mostly a typer, but then this recently I've gone back to like pen and paper. And what I've found is that yes, you can get more efficient on typing because it's much more faster to type than writing with pen. But as far as like thought clarity and emotion clarity, I don't know. I think much more clear when I'm like writing on paper. I'm not sure if there's like a difference on
Yeah,
that.
I believe I read somewhere that when it comes to retention, remembering stuff in your brain, in your mind, that writing, the physical act of writing, there is something about it that helps retain information better. So that's what, when I was in high school back in India, when I prepared for our big annual exams, that's when I first discovered that writing really helps me with retention. And then later I saw an article that it does. So I don't know, since maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't know, but I feel that it really helps with memory retention as well.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said about risk adverse. Um, like I am a very rebel son. Parang nakapit do. Um, and I think my mom, for the most part, and recently, since I'm older now, I'm a little bit more articulate than I was then when I was younger. When I was younger, she would always tell me, "Oh, Siddharth, you were born here in America. You can become the president of the United States if you can." So she gave me that big vision. But then at the same time, you should tell me, oh, lobjongchi ra juma kala karis sagimbe, right? And that never resonated with me. Ra. Like, what are you gonna eat, right? That should be the reason why you should be educated or go to college, it's to get a good job or to make a living. And that never resonated with me too much, right? So I mean, it's weird because like they were super entrepreneurial. They like left their hometown of India, or my mom like grew up in Sikkim, Gangto, um, close to Darjeeling. And then she came here when she was super young. It's like super entrepreneurial, I guess. And but then whenever I do something entrepreneurial, like for example, my mom doesn't like it that I give this example, but during COVID, because of COVID lockdown, everything was Zoom, right? I decided to go to a community college for my first 2 years instead of a 4-year college because everything was on Zoom. It was 10% of the price if I went to a 4-year, right? And it just made sense to me. But then they didn't want me doing that because the stigma, or they thought it was like a lower
The
quality
perception that
education.
is lower quality.
Exactly, right? And yeah, that's something I deal with my mom, and that made me think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I in a way I get where your mom is coming from because I say something similar to my kids in terms of when since they could speak, I still, we ask these questions, what do you want to be or whatever, and they'll say teacher or whatever. And I say, great, you can also become the first Tibetan Cambodian American president, I should try to sow this because those things I never heard growing up. It was always nurse, Dr. Chinayapo, do you know, like that? So I try to instill this. I totally get where your mom is coming from. And I also get the sometimes conflicting messages of dream big, stick to stable, stick to stable.
Exactly.
There's conflicting messages I get because uh, as a parent, as a mom myself, even though I was educated in an English school back in India, I sometimes find myself in a position where I'm conflicted, where I want my daughters to dream bigger and all of that, right? And I want them to be independent thinkers. I want to be less of a helicopter parent, allow them to make mistakes, be progressive, challenge me even. Things I didn't necessarily have the autonomy to do when I was growing. Challenge my parent. What? Like, I am okay with my kids. In fact, I encourage them to challenge me because, critical thinking comes from not just being compliant. I don't want them to be compliant. I want them to speak up, be able to advocate for themselves. Yet there are times when I find my background, my upbringing, where it comes into play with parenting, where I'm like, yakuchinde, pumoy na, yakuchinde, oh, di kongwe, like with clothing and stuff like that.
Mm.
So there was that constant back and forth in my mind as a parent where I'm like, I want to give you the autonomy to think for yourself, to figure out, to make mistakes. But there is also that part of me that spent half of my life growing up in an environment where it's opposite of, you
Mm.
know? So being a human that I am, I'm constantly trying to find that balance. And I don't think it'll be I found it kind of thing. And I imagine if that's for your mom as well, where she's constantly toying back and forth and trying to find that happy medium.
Mm.
So when she says, kala, tugu suyatanda, legacy or whatever, it probably comes from a self-preservation mindset, where she wants you to stick to something safe and stable and not lose or fail. And
Mm.
at the same time, like, oh, President Chitu, can Chitu, like, there is also that dare to dream bigger because, you've come to America. We are in a land of opportunities. So yes, I get the juxtaposition of the different mindsets that happen, especially for an immigrant parent.
Right. Right. How old are your kids?
My kids are 12 and 13.
Oh, okay. They're getting that teenage phase now.
Yeah, very scary stage, right? Very scary
Yeah.
stage. And going along what you were saying, I mean, I didn't go to high school here. So what I watch, my understanding of high school and middle school is what I watch on Netflix TV shows of what they show, which is probably very Hollywood. My kids always say, Mom, that's not how our schools are. But I like to watch it because I like to kind of understand what kind of, ecosystem they're in and what life are they in. Obviously, that I didn't live. Mine was a lot more regimented, very strict, lots of boundaries, lots of rules. And theirs isn't. So yeah, they are at that stage where they are exploring who they are, and it's challenging being. That's probably one of the most challenging things of being an entrepreneur is being a parent as well as an entrepreneur. Because being a parent itself can be a full-time job, especially
Mm.
where they're at that very formidable age.
Mm.
Yeah.
But by the way, what Netflix shows are you currently watching, or what are your favorites?
I just finished watching Virgin River just
Okay.
because I was bored, but I needed something to take my mind off the day-to-day things that just kind of it's like a Netflix is like a escape for me in some sense. I watch things that are like teenage TV shows
Mm.
just because it's not my reality. So I
Mm.
like to take my mind off of. But in general, I like Dexter. I don't know if that makes me like psycho because I really enjoyed Dexter. And I like that Narcos. Oh my gosh, that was one of my favorite Narcos
Oh
on
yeah,
Netflix. Yeah, that
mm,
was so good. Anyway, yeah, those are the kind of shows I enjoy.
yeah. It's very the Narcos one was very humanizing. Like there's a lot of emphasis on his family and stuff like that. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a weird thing to like deal with. Like this guy's a kingpin drug dealer, but then like he cares so much about his family. Like makes it very
Yeah.
complex.
Right, right. And beef. Oh my gosh. Was it beef? Yeah. The Netflix show that is a whole Asian American cast.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure it's called Beef. But check it out. It won a
God.
lot of awards and rightfully so. It was incredible. Started off kind of slow, and you're like, where are they going with this plot? But again, just like Narcos, very humanizing, very complex, kind of shows the whole Asian American experience, the complexities of growing
Mm.
up as a children of immigrants. Which
Right.
I'm like, oh, my kids, is that what they're going to go through? And when they tell their story in future. So anyway, yeah, definitely recommend that show.
You decided to homeschool your kids during COVID, right?
Um, yes and no. During COVID, the school district was closed, and so everything went virtual. So
Mm,
the school was at home out of the
got it.
computer.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, got it.
yeah.
Um, is it okay for me if I ask you like, oh, in Darjeeling, I think you spent a few years there. Is that correct?
A lot, yeah.
A lot.
I went to a boarding school named Mount Hermon School. It was a Christian boarding school in Darjeeling. So yeah, I went there from I think second grade all the way to 12th grade.
Got it. And then, and for like the 2 months break, you would go back home, right? So
Exactly.
it was like a whole different culture shift back and forth. I'm sure that was like a lot to think about when you were young. And then applying that to your kids, being Cambodian, Tibetan Cambodian or Cambodian Tibetan. How do you? I'm not sure if you need to balance it or what the right wording is, but then how do you share and introduce both cultures like equally? Because I know we have a lot of listeners who are of mixed race, and I'm sure they're curious and they would like to know your perspective as a mother.
Yeah, from a parent's perspective, it's very challenging, completely honest. I mean, being a parent is so hard. Think before you have kids. But don't rush is what I mean if you plan to have kids. But yeah, being a parent, it's in itself, I think it's very challenging, especially in this day and age when social media is so second nature, even for a much younger generation, even for children's generation, it adds a whole layer of complexity to the psyche, to the growing up experience and all of that. And then you take into play mixed race children like mine. They're half Cambodian and half Tibetan. I haven't found a solution. It's an ongoing learning process, learning and unlearning process for me. I tried the whole Sunday Tibetan Sunday school thing, which in recent times they've given me a lot of pushback. So I stepped back. It was, yeah, they're at a stage where they are, when you go from transition from elementary to middle school, I feel like you're entering your teenage years, you're
Oh,
exploring who you are.
your kids gave you pushback.
Yeah, yeah. My kids gave me a lot of pushback because, and I don't want to speak for them, but my sense was that they, in some sense, because being mixed Tibetan race is not necessarily much more common these days, but still not very common in general, like the other Asian communities, right? Especially the Tibetan community. So I think, I think they felt like they didn't quite fit in or whatever. So I tried hiring for virtual private classes for Tibetan language and whatnot, which we put a pause on. So it's still an ongoing process where I have a hard time trying to find a balance of how much to push and how much to hold back and give them space. I don't want to be the one saying, this is what I went through, so you should do it too. Because the reality is, I went through it as fully Tibetan in a very Tibetan, Kalora, dense community in India and Nepal. Their lived experience is far different than mine. They're growing up born here, half Tibetan, half Cambodian, right? In a neighborhood that's predominantly not Tibetan, right? So that's the balance that I'm constantly trying to find and working on is where I don't want to impose my expectations based on my lived experience on theirs.
Mm.
It's a learning experience for me. So yeah, I mean, right now, just conversation bringing it naturally about, whether it's Tibet history or food or whatever. But then there's also the Cambodian side, right? Mm, my husband's side is largely lives around, literally lives like within a couple of miles radius. So they have a lot more exposure to the Cambodian side. But as far as the cultural element or the educational side of it, it's very little on the Cambodian side. And partly I think it's because Tibetans, we tend to be more more assertive. Hello, I can't think of the word. Tibetans, we tend to push more to preserve our culture in any way we can. Is understandably so. It's because we have lost our country and we are actively fighting a cultural genocide where language is trying to be erased, right? Say, for example, Cambodia, they still my husband is Cambodian immigrant and, my kids' uncles and aunts and everyone, but they still have a country where the language is thriving. So there isn't that necessarily that urgency for them to preserve it in the sense that us Tibetans feel. So it's again, like with many things in life, it's a constant for me of trying to find that balance where I don't push them so hard where they feel resentful and yeah, feels
Mm.
unnatural to them. Um, and yet I want to make sure that it's a constant in the back of their mind.
Mm.
reminding them that they are also half Tibetans. Yes, they're American, they're half Cambodian, but really, really important, they also have Tibetan. And I have a really cute video of my two girls when they were little, and I used to record them, and they were role playing. And one of them was like my younger daughter, Karma. She was like, "Hi, I'm Karma, and I'm Tibetan, and that's my Acha, and she's Cambodian," like very cute. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, again, one of those things where I don't know that there is an absolute all, one size fits all solution or approach to it. It's very situational, it's very personal. But one thing for sure is that it's definitely always at the top of mind.
Yeah. It's very difficult, and I can imagine it's difficult for you and for your kids. That's something that I'm sure they're like starting to think about as well, like their identity, because they have so many different elements to them, especially. And I think what you said about you're not want to going to Tibetan school and push back, I think that's like prevalent even for like you know, kids that are like maybe like both their parents are Tibetan, right? It's like I've seen it in my class when I went to Tibetan Sunday school. Um, I wanted to learn Tibetan, and my passion for Tibetan is not because I want to like preserve our culture so much. Of course, there's some element to that, but then like when I learned Tibetan, I feel like my Buddhism or my knowledge of Buddhism gets so much better, and like that's so practical for me because meditating, just practicing mindfulness, practicing yingje, compassion is so helpful for me and like my mental health, right? So that's my like motivation. But then I can see like some of my classmates who didn't have the opportunities that I've had. I lived 2 years in India when I was younger. I've met Gyaro Rinpoche a few times. I had that privilege. I've had the privilege of spending time in like a monastery or Gompa and like studying, and they don't I guess they didn't have those opportunities. So there's a lot of pushback, or there's a lot of disengagement within the classroom for them to learn Tibetan. And I can see that with my own brother sometimes as well. Like my mom and my brother are constantly going back and forth of going to Tibetan school or not. So I volunteered 2 years during COVID at my Tibetan Sunday school after I graduated high school. My number one goal was to create a good relationship with Tibetan on them, right? Of course, the classes were 2 hours, but then because it was on Zoom, I shortened it to an hour and a half. But even further, if I saw like some weeks that they weren't paying attention or they were tired, I would like end it at an hour and like I mix in like videos, like kid cartoon videos and stuff like that. I watched them like show them like the Gundam movie, just like different dynamics. So I made it as like entertaining as possible, and that was my goal. But not sure if I achieved it or not. But it's a very difficult situation. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And my hope is that one day when they get older and they see how passionate their mom is about preserving culture, how I know best. Doesn't always have to be with proficiency of language. If that doesn't end up being their thing, doesn't have to be through politics. It can be through whatever platform or channel that they are passionate about. They can keep their Tibetan side of the story alive. So I hope that one day my journey will aspire them to keep that story alive. So let's see, time will tell.
Yeah, and I think for my like peers, right, whether they be like both their parents be Tibetans or maybe they're mixed race, there is a come around where like when they get older, they're like, oh, that's a big part of who I am, right? And then they become interested. But then it's such a new thing now. We're like the third generation of immigrants. There's not enough resources there for them to allow and immerse themselves easily into like the Tibetan community or culture. If you want to learn Buddhism, I think it might be a little bit easier because there's so much interest around Buddhism. You can read text, like listen to like lectures in English. But then as far as like language and like the other uh, community aspects, it's very difficult. And I think that was like the main reason why we started this podcast, because all these mainstream, you and I have talked about this, like it's for some of us it's so much easier to engage dialogue in English than Tibetan, right? To articulate our emotions or thoughts in English than Tibetan. So I think there will be a turnaround. And I've seen with my friends, my peers, and it makes me so happy that there is a turnaround. There is an interest. So like I like for some of them it is language. Like, oh, I want to learn Tibetan now, right? But like I don't know where to start. And it's very difficult. And I like put them, I show them resources, but there's only so much I can do. Or on the flip side,
Right.
in politics. There's an interest in politics that they've always been politically disengaged.
Right.
Because maybe they see like going to protests as like barbaric, but there's other ways to do it. So that makes me really happy to see that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely promising. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And then going back, one thing that makes me like so curious is w- when I've seen on your Instagram videos, all like the momos are perfectly shaped and like the perfectly sized. Everything looks so symmetrical and all the same. Like how do you get that? Because even my amla's momos, my grandparents' momos are delicious, but they're always like there's different shapes to each like individual momo.
Yeah, yeah. So short answer, I automate them now. So my Momo production is automated. In order for me to scale, I have to automate it because the margins are so low. So there's one. But I only started automating about a couple of months ago. Before that, I was hand making everything. And the ironic part was when I was hand making everything, people would assume that it was automated production because it was all so consistently shaped. Part of it has to do with my personality. I'm very particular about consistency and systemizing things, which I feel like also important elements for a small business, especially if you can't afford to make a lot of mistakes. Systems and consistency is everything. And that applied even to the way I made Momo right from the get-go. Even before I even thought about launching a retail brand, I had my wrapper measures this many grams, my filling measures this many grams. So if I have family members helping me, there's a scale. Do not put anything over or under it. This many pleats, I want this many pleats. Shape it this way, like that. So those were all habits or tendencies, my natural tendencies that I applied right when I was doing pop-ups that have helped my Momo look very pretty and people assume that it was automated. But that being said, a couple of months ago, I did start automating the
Mhm.
production.
Can you walk us through like the automation process? Like, what does that look like what sort of machines do you use, or like what parts are
Yeah,
automated versus aren't? Yeah.
yeah. So one of the biggest challenges that I ran into hand making, even though when it comes to the pace or the speed of making Momo, I'm pretty fast. I'll give you a run for your money. I after making thousands and thousands and thousands over the years, I become really fast. So I can outrun everybody making Momo. But that said, I can only make so much raw in a given day. And at some point last year, my fingers, the two main things that I started using, and my shoulders literally started numbing
Oh
just
no.
from the constant repetition, right? And there were a couple of moments where I couldn't lift my arm up. And it was a very, very scary feeling for me. Before I launched and when I was in the planning stage, I did realize that at some point, if I wanted to become a national brand, I couldn't continue hand making stuff. It would kill my business before I even started because the costs are too great and there is not enough profit in order for the business to survive. So I knew at some point the automation would come. What I did not expect was automation, the need for automation to happen sooner than I had anticipated. I didn't realize that my arm was going to give out um, last year, within the first year itself, which even though it was the first year of my launch, now keep in mind, I was still making thousands and thousands of momos doing for my seasonal pop-ups for 6 years prior to that. So my arm was already getting worked out a lot. So anyway, long story short, I started researching into machines that would automate the plating part of it, right? And I found many, many machines made in China and stuff like that for fairly expensive, for fairly cheap, $10,000 and under. I have this thing about purchasing stuff that are either made local, if not local, made in USA, and it is for my own personal reasons. I try to not to buy made in China as much as possible, as much as I possibly can. It's not always possible, I get it. So machines, I kept looking and I finally found a machine. It's like the Cadillac, if Cadillac is such a thing. It's like the Cadillac of Momo machines. I think Cadillac's outdated reference. But anyway, yeah, this one is a Taiwan, made in Taiwan brand that's been around for decades. Lots of very large companies use it and they make not just dumplings, but many things, egg rolls, samosas, quesadillas, whatever you can think of, they make it. Anyway, they've been doing it for decades. Very reputable brand. And it was, yeah, months, many, many months long process. Selected the machine. Then I had to come up with the money because it was almost $70,000.
Wow.
Very expensive, the most expensive. So I was like, dang, where am I going to come up with the money? Anyway, I squirreled away everything that I made and yeah, and used most of it towards purchasing that. And then I got a state of business grant, state of Oregon uh, business grant that is geared towards helping small Oregon manufacturers grow. So I got a grant from them to pay the remaining balance of the machine because the machine was stuck in Taiwan for a while because I couldn't come up with the remaining $40,000. So yeah, so it was months long process. But not only that, people think, oh, the automation, Rastata, it's so easy, everything's smooth sailing, right? No. I've heard people say sometimes in the past, oh, so and so used to hand make momo. Any machine so momo shimbu mindu. And I used to always find it like logically, I used to kind of odd. I was like, the recipe chikpa, the recipe is the same. How can the momo be less tasty if the machine's making it? Once I received the machine, then I realized where that potential change of flavors comes from. There is a whole mechanical implication to using a machine for going handmade. From the temperature of the body touching the dough to the mechanical heat that is generated from the machine being used, it changes the texture of the dough, the composition, the filling. There is a whole science behind it. And it took me 3.5 months of working with the machine. The machine is so sophisticated that it took me 3.5 months of like going crazy of doing all these production runs to make sure that ultimately what came out that was pleated matched my hand making from the mouth feel to the flavors to everything. It took me 3.5 months. So just because you buy a machine, to anyone who's thinking about doing so, whether it's for Momo or anything else, doesn't necessarily mean that it's done. No, there can be mechanical implications of how it changes the composition of your product.
Wow. That's so interesting. The
It's very
human
fascinating.
touch.
Yes, yes, you don't think about, right? That the temperature of one's body is different from one another. For example, my hands are usually very cool. My sister-in-law's hands are normally very hot. So it changes the way the dough pleats. The room temperature can affect it. The moisture in the room can affect it. There's so many variables. So once you start increasing the production, all those variables start affecting the composition of your dough, the mouthfeel eventually of the wrapper, and everything. So I learned more about the science of dough and filling than I cared to learn in those 3.5 months that I was trying to nail down the machine.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Did you figure it out through trial and error? Did you have to like
Trial
research
and
and
error.
yeah.
Trial and error and a combination of trial and error and research. And I must have spent thousands of dollars worth of trial and error production runs
Wow.
using the machine before I nailed it. Yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting. And then now the output, like how much more, I don't know if you can get a percentage or like a number of momos,
3,000%
3,000% in output.
productivity increase.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. So the ROI, the returns on investment is there. Granted, it's extremely expensive. I was like price took a shot for a long time before I had to snap out of it. But I was like, okay, if my hands, do I want to preserve my arm? Because at one point I couldn't even carry a tray of pasta when I dropped it because my muscle was just in there. I couldn't even hold, I didn't even have grip on it. That's how bad my muscles and my arms got me in there. So I was like, okay, if I want to preserve my arm, and have to deal with labor shortages that are happening in the food industry in particular. Then you have to teach somebody how to make it perfectly like you do, which is a niche skill set. That is another layer of complexity adds to running a small business. All those factors taken into play, right? I was like, I'm going to bite the bullet and somehow figure out a way to come up with the $70,000 to pay for the machine, and the ROI will come eventually. And if nothing at all, it'll preserve my arm. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
as an entrepreneur, as you running your business, you've like gone through so many problems, you face so many challenges. What makes you like keep going on and not like giving up?
It's my why, truly. Sometimes people will ask me, what is the one advice you can give to somebody who wants to start their own business or whatever? And I tell them, be very clear on your why, because that's
Mm,
going to be your anchor in your moments of weakness and your moments of self-doubt and exhaustion.
mm,
Why are you doing this? If it's just for the money, then I feel that it won't last. That stamina won't be there because money you can get from working 9 to 5 or whatever in an office, right? If it's for, I don't know, a bigger aspiration, then I feel that that really keeps you going because the dream is so much bigger than yours to
mm,
keep. For me, I feel like my dream is like can have an evergreen, lasting impact. That
mm,
truly, that if I can be successful, I can truly open up the pathways for other Tibetans to think bigger and think outside the box. So that keeps me going. And also the my Google reviews keeps me going.
mm.
When I feel really overwhelmed and sometimes I feel sad, I wallow. I have my pity party moments. I give myself permission to do that because I'm
But
human, Ra. Sometimes I'm like, everyone's having so much fun, partying, going picnics, and here I'm in the kitchen by myself, and I feel so sorry for myself. And they're like, okay, you get 5 minutes, and then snap out of it. And then I read Google reviews. I really do. I read my Google reviews religiously, and I love the fact that people put so much thought into what they're sharing in their feedback. And sometimes all it takes is kind words from a guest or, from somebody who supports my aspirations. And that really just gives me a morale boost and lifts
Mm,
my spirit. So it
mm,
doesn't take me very much to lift my spirits
mm.
and keep me going. Yeah.
What's your what was can you share one Google review that resonated with you a lot?
I can't think of one particular one, but there was one comment that was made a couple of years ago that really stuck with me. And that was like, that's exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. Someone wrote on my Facebook, one of my Facebook posts, we came here for your Momo. We ended up learning a lot more about Tibet.
Mm,
Amazing, or something along those lines. And I was like, that's it. That's why. Sure, I love Momo. Sure,
mm,
I love having that gratification of seeing people enjoy a cultural food. But I love that it also can generate curiosity, not for everyone, but for some people, it can generate curiosity for beyond where this food is coming from and what culture it represents.
mm,
And that truly is what keeps me going.
mm,
And that's why in my little cafe on the walls, I made it a point. My decor is fairly minimal, but I made it a point to make a poster of like what is Momo and give some historical
mm,
context to it. Where is Tibet? I have a map of what Tibet actually is versus what Tibet is depicted, which is a fraction of historical Tibet, and so on and so forth. Because I really want not just my brand, but also my space to be as to raise as much awareness as possible.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. And that's your why.
That's my why. Yeah.
Yeah.
To tell our story, truly.
Mm. And by any chance, do you know a guy named Simon Sinek? No?
No. Should
No?
I?
Okay. You should watch his so he has a book and a TED Talk, Simon Sinek. His last name is Sinek. My favorite author thinker outside of Garo Rinpoche. He has a book called Start With Why. His TED Talk is about 15,
Oh,
20 minutes long. Start With Why. You should listen to it. Amazing. It's about like what we do, it can change here and there, but then why you should do something like your pillar is like it's exactly what you said. It's like our what comes in different forms, right? But then our why to raise awareness to bring awareness to our Tibetan stories. That why is I think consistent. I think almost every Tibetan. So you definitely a good listen. My favorite book of all time. If you can, if a little bit more time to
okay.
read the book, yeah,
Awesome. Yeah. If it's a podcast, I love listening to
uh,
podcasts. Awesome. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
He
Thank you.
He has a podcast as well, but the TED Talk is like a good summary of his like main ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just have one last question. It's not like inspirational thing, but uh what are the next steps that you need to take in order to fulfill that like big dream of, being all across these national stores?
The next steps are already in motion, right? The truth is, when we think of milestones, we think, oh, we need to do, we think of it like in a vacuum, right? Oh, to hit the stores, you need to do this. The truth is, it's a snowball effect, right? So when I launched, that journey started to go national. That
Mm,
was my approach. That was my mindset. That journey has begun. It's baby steps, sure. You can't see it yet at the store, sure. That journey has begun and those seeds have been sowed, you
mm,
know? So I feel that it's a snowball effect from farmers market to next year. You will probably see locals will see me at more farmers markets. I tried to hire, like right now, while I'm doing this podcast, I've hired a Tibetan high school student. And I told her, I said, Yang Jin, when you are here standing in my branded canopy, and you're not only representing my brand, you are also, in some sense, being an ambassador to our Tibetan culture because for many people who walk by and that you speak to today, they might have never even heard about Tibet. They might have maybe just even, So I was like, remember, this is not just about representing my brand, you're also being an ambassador to our Tibetan culture. So so the journey has begun. Lots of seeds are actively being sowed in the background right now. So there will be a lot of exciting announcements to come in early 2024. And all those milestones that will come will be one step closer to the ultimate dream of going national. And how it becomes national, I am still figuring out of what will be the most viable pathway or sales channel for me to do so. But it will happen.
mm.
Yeah, it's happening.
Thank you so much. I hopefully this conversation inspires other young Tibetans to innovate and to be entrepreneurs. Where can our listeners find you or your delicious momos?
Well, if you're a local, you're lucky. Right now, I sell only locally at farmers market or at my shop in the city of Beaverton. But if you live outside Beaverton, don't worry. You can follow my small business journey on Instagram or Facebook. I'm on Himalayan Dumplings with the S at the end. Or you can subscribe to my newsletter, which is kind of like my diary, long form diary that I send out that people really seem to enjoy reading. But yeah, if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, it's just HimalayanDumplings.com. But hopefully, in a matter of time, I will be available. My products will be available somewhere where near where you live.
Thank you, Kiki.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you. And congratulations again for doing what you do. Truly,
Thank you so
how
much.
amazing it is to have the honor and opportunity for me to have a platform where I can share the little that I've learned through trials and error, and be able to do so comfortably. That also gives me an opportunity to speak on topics that aren't unusual, about spirituality or religion and politics, which are absolutely very important, but there are also so many different aspects to our identity, right? Especially for those of us, most of us, right, who live outside Tibet, whether it's in Chige or Gyara or wherever. So I love that you're providing this platform where we can have a dialogue about things like this. And hopefully my story can, even if it's for one person, serve to inspire somebody that if you have those butterflies in your stomach and you think of an idea and you are so scared your heart is beating just thinking about it but you can't let it go and it's just haunting you, that you probably got a burning passion there.
Mm.
And especially if you're not a parent, it's the best time to go for it and fail if you must. Nothing wrong with failing, but give it a try. You never know. So
It's
Thank you
our
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you so much. I wanted to add one more thing. You talked about
Oh,
politics. It reminded me of something. Um, there's I think a representative named Jim McGovern. He's a member of Congress, and
I've heard.
he's from Massachusetts. He's one of our biggest supporters of Tibetan of Gao Rinpoche in our U.S. Congress. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the way that he came about so passionate about our cause is because he used to go to a Tibetan restaurant, and then over time, he talked to the owner once and twice, and the owner described like his own story, the story of Tibetans, the story of Gao Rinpoche, and Jim McGovern got so passionate about it. So, what you're doing is more than just food, more than just Momo. It's about, connecting. Like you said, food is your love language. It's about spreading love to everyone.
Yeah, truly, human connection, right? Politics is necessary, doesn't always resonate with everybody. Some people disengage and shut off. So it doesn't matter what your passion is, music, acting, I don't know, what else is out there. Whatever your passion is, there's surely got to be a way that you can keep our Tibetan story alive.
Thank you so
So
much,
all the
Kiki.
best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Lila.